Karlin. Karlin Love was born in the US. She's a composer and performer, now living in Launceston, Tasmania. She moved in 1989 to Australia to take the position of woodwind lecturer at the University of Tasmania, where she taught clarinet, saxophone theory, composition and improvisation until 1997, and taught music education. She now works on research projects investigating advanced composition and performance teaching and learning, and is a freelance performer, composer, curator, and teacher. Karlin aims to gently extend and expand traditional sound worlds and provoke greater democracy in music making. I won't read all of the other things, but they're all on the website there. And Karlin's session today is called Making Your Music Department an Island of Crazy Sanity, Theory, Creativity and Expertise Development Theory, in a nutshell, and useful for educators. And this is also the first part. This is the theory part. After lunch at 1:30, Karlin's doing the practical part, if you want to join her for that session later today. Thanks, Karlin.
Thank you, Wendy. So that's a very bold, presumptuous title, and we'll see if I can even come close to living up to it. Yes, I want to acknowledge that I'm, an alien here in Lutarita, on Aboriginal land that was managed much better before the Europeans arrived, and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging, and hope that in our pursuit of creativity we actually attune to those ways of knowing as well. I think that's something that our Western culture has a big deficit in. This comes out of my PhD study in a kind of indirect way, in that my study, which I finished back in 2013, was on a program for advanced composition learning in one of the embedded in the orchestra programs. So most of the students were post-tertiary, and it was supposed to be situated in creativity theory, but the more that I saw what was going on, it was really about how to fit in the environment and operate as an expert. So I brought the expertise theory in as well. But the whole time, because I was still, teaching in schools and privately and a little bit at the university here to the music education students, was like, this just provides, there's a lot here, I think, to provide frameworks for us to think about the whole gamut of music learning and teaching. So this is my chance to transfer this over a little bit and see how it works and how it fits. What that means is that some of the resources are going to be a little bit on the old side. I have been reading since then, but I haven't actually integrated much of the recent stuff into this presentation. What I have read doesn't conflict with it, but that's when I turn it into the proper paper, then I'll actually swat up on that. I'll upload a reference list to the chat at some point when I remember in the course of this. For those of you who find that sort of thing interesting, it'll be most of what I refer to. So a thriving creative practice involves both innovation, doing something new and different, and mastery. And you're not going to get very far with it for very long if you don't actually know what's going on in the field and the domain and how people work and what the tools are. No matter how surprising and brilliant your idea is, there's still a cultural place that you've got to fit into and a history that you're responding to, because that's what the rest of the world that you're communicating with is embedded in. But I think, but that's okay. So I'm going to start with the expertise side, and I'm going to do the share screen thing. And, but know that I'm thinking of the two together most of the time, creativity and expertise. And I'll bring some of my reasons for that together in a few slides. But so let me just see if I can get this screen share to work. That should be the one. We'll go to slideshow and see how well I get lost. somewhere here, I actually have the slides printed out too. So that was as close to a Hawaiian shirt as I could find in the presets for PowerPoint. Just this island motif. I hope that brightens your day. Okay. So expertise is, if we just think of it as getting really good at something, there's that whole 10,000 hours thing that's been bandied about. Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outlier, really popularized that. It came out of a study by Ericsson and some of his colleagues back in the 90s. And they studied violinists and pianists and basically compared those who had really made it with those who hadn't. And there was this sort of 10,000 hour of practice minimum threshold for those who actually made it. But there were other things too that haven't gotten the same amount of press, which is a process of reflection and analysis of what you're doing, and quality coaching and facilities, and being then inducted into this community of practitioners. So, you know, you might be able to go and practice your 10 or 20,000 hours out in the bush, but if you're not part of that world and that community, it's not going to work as well, you know? So really integral to it is the facilities and the coaching, which is basically connecting to people who know even more than you do. Richard Sennett wrote a book called The Craftsman, which he's a sociologist and talked a lot about embodied knowledge and how our hands and bodies know stuff as well as our head. And he's an amateur cellist as well, and a member of the Linux programming community. So he also talked about how, you know, the medieval guilds, the whole apprentice, journeyman, master kind of system, and the more even democratic programmer community, how important those are to actually developing what we, you know, what we can do and what we can do well. These are the people that I actually got kind of most excited about, which is a little, you know, it's a 1993 book called Surpassing Ourselves by Karl Bereiter and Bereiter Scardamalia. And I'll highly recommend that to any educator, and I will stick the list in the chat eventually. They've done a bunch of research with primary school students and on writing. They also had them reading and understanding and, you know, learning how to process scientific articles, you know, peer-reviewed level, not kids' textbook stuff. And they put together sort of a model of what expertise development really involves and really looks like. And in more creative, I think there's fits creative pursuits better than a lot of the work that was done at that time, which was like experts do things faster because they've got the knowledge chunked and they can just grab big bits and they can just do things faster. That's true for laboratory type studies, but not your real life work. And one of the things that Bereiter mentioned was that, you know, the fastest writers in the world are actually 4th and 5th graders, at least they were in 1993, because they just did it, you know, and your expert writers would consider all these other possibilities and make choices and weigh them against each other. And they take a whole lot longer because they actually took in a lot bigger world when they were making their choices. So part of it's looking for possibilities. Another part that comes from that then is what they describe as progressive problem solving. So every time you solve one problem or create, you know, make one creative work or something, it triggers ideas for more that extend things out farther, you know. And I always feel like when I write a piece, I get ideas for 4 more in that process, so I can never catch up, you know, doomed. But that progressive problem solving is what is the difference between what they call, you know, describe as an expert, and I think this is an extremely useful term, the experienced non-expert. The experienced non-expert is someone who's good at something, but they're not really interested in making things any better or solving any new problems. The experienced non-expert is the one stuck in a rut, making expertise look bad. So I'm just going to read the quote from the back cover of the book. You'd think I could get in farther, but I'm not. because I think it's a really good description of what the kind of expertise that serves thinking about creative practices. Expertise is a process of progressive problem solving in which people continually rethink and redefine their tasks. A future expert society will not be a heaven in which all problems have disappeared, but a realistic utopia in which endless problem solving will be a highly valued part of life. Progressive problem solvers stay healthier, live longer, and experience the intense mental pleasure known as flow. They repeatedly go beyond their well-learned procedures, avoid getting into ruts, and surpass themselves, hence the book title, by reformulating problems at new and more complex levels. They are able to transform insoluble predicaments into soluble problems to the benefit of everyone. Now, the thing that I think I found most exciting about their descriptions was they described expert-like learners, that you don't have to have made it to expert status, expert knowledge, expert experience, you don't have to have done your 10,000 plus hours to begin to think and work that way. So expert-like learners are people who approach their field in the same way. They don't have all the experience, they don't have that same body of knowledge, but they're looking for the new problems, they're looking for possibilities, and they're building on their experiences to go in new directions and extend their art form or their field of study. And I'll come back to that. So we'll jump onto this a little bit. So there's different kinds of expertise, motor skills and memory, speed of reasoning. Those kind of things have been studied with laboratory controlled experiments where it was, not on the cutting edge of the experts. So of course they could do it faster. But ultimately, much expertise is about making good choices in particular situations. And the higher end it is, the more it's about making untried choices rather than just recalling the correct answer. So the two brothers, Hubert and Stuart Dreyfus, actually studied pilots for the US Air Force back in the 1980s. And they discovered that the expert pilots couldn't actually land a plane by following, well, I don't know if they couldn't, but they found it very difficult to land a plane by following the instructions they'd been given as beginners because their way of thinking about it had shifted. And Patricia Benner worked with kind of the Dreyfus theory in nursing education. And what they both, they didn't work completely independently, but they both came up with a model of essentially sort of a development, 5-stage development theory, because stage theories always, are easier to publish, I think. But going through a progression of being a beginner where you follow the instructions that you're given to through an advanced beginner to becoming competent, where you're becoming able to read the context that you're in and discern, which instructions you should be following, to proficient and expert. And the farther you get through that, the more your choices about what to do in that situation are based on being able to perceive a lot more nuance in the situation and then come up with an intuitive response based on your experience from a lot of cases of being in that situation. So you're not consciously running the procedure anymore. And I kind of think, that whole phenomenon of kind of apprentices, journeymen, and the masters, and the whole old guild system, probably the journeymen are the people that could translate from the masters who operated intuitively to the apprentices who needed rules and procedures and stuff. And that's one of the roles I think we sort of have as educators. Gee, that wasn't in my script. Here we go. So you might also move between those stages depending on different tasks, or you might get assigned to a different ward. The cardiac nurse moves to neonatal and all of a sudden is back as an advanced beginner in some ways. We certainly have that happening with our students when you've got the good sight reader who all of a sudden has to play by ear. And I think one of the things that we can really offer support in is helping students recognize that everything doesn't develop at the same rate, and we're not at the same stage, we're not operating the same way. And to notice that and accept it and celebrate that that's a reality. As somebody that could read well, as a kid. I could read on clarinet, and I could read on guitar because I could read on clarinet. I could play by ear on guitar, but I couldn't play by ear on clarinet or improvise. You know, I had to work hard at that, and it didn't feel good to try until you get going with it. So if we can help our students understand, hey, this is what happens. You know, you may be able to shred like crazy, but you know, you're having trouble with that bit. That's okay. You're at a different stage in it, but it's still a journey worth being on. The numerous experiences that accumulate that experts draw on and get described as case knowledge. And so each of those experiences is considered a case. And you just, you know, all these memories, you know, of experiences that worked or didn't work. The way you develop expertise, according to Benner, and I like this, is that you go into a situation and you've kind of developed a theory about how things work in your head. And that situation, your theory either does or doesn't work. And where it doesn't work, you kind of refine it for the next one. And so that's sort of another case to add to your library. One of the things that people with more experience can do for learners is share from their case experience, share what they think the best odds options are. And Bereiter and Scardamalia called that sharing promisingness. What's the best, you know, best odds? And it might not be the thing that works, but it's got better odds than just, you know, randomly pulling it out of the blue from less experience. So that's something, again, as educators, we can offer that without prescribing the solution or this is the best way to do it. Sharing from, you know, we can kind of improve the chances of success. You're going to build a lot better case knowledge library from successes than you will from failures. We learn from failures, obviously, and we're going to have those, and they're important. But from successes, you actually get a little bit more to build with for, you know, your hunches for the next situation. Okay, so Bereiter and Scardamalia assert that creative expertise is really just expertise. Experts taking bigger leaps in their choice of progressive problems. These problems just don't have as much obviously relevant previous case knowledge. So promisingness is really important then, because the existing procedures or ideas aren't going to be enough. Now, how far you leap as a creative practitioner has also been studied, and that's worth having a think about. Robert Sternberg described different ways a creative act or product affects its field, and he called these propulsions, like how you're moving your art form along or whatever. So new work might just continue the kinds of things that are already happening, accept what's currently going on and extend it, or it might, you know, make another one of what we're having, another overture in B flat in 4/4 time that goes da 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 da. Sorry, or it might move a bit faster. It might go beyond what's being done, but you have to know what's being done to know to go beyond. Alternatively, it might be, let's start in a new direction, or we went wrong way back then and let's go back to that place. We actually, our counterpoint's been stuffed up for 200 years. Let's go back to Bach and rebuild from there. Or actually our entire tonal system is stupid and let's start something completely new. So there's kind of this different range of how much you're pushing the field. Now, take a moment just to think about that. What kinds of creative propulsions do you think your students are interested in? Just adding to an existing practice, you know, like making a song like their favorite band makes a song, or pushing it out further, unconventional combinations. I'm going to do a piece for bagpipe and penny whistle and cello and harpsichord. Do this. Starting with a different way of making sound. They don't have to be new in a global sense, but they're new to them. And just, you know, which kinds of creative propulsions are you prepared to support? Let's just say our curriculum is a little limited on that officially, but that doesn't mean that we can't help tweak the way the assessment game goes to help those directions fit in there. Jenny McDonald and I had a student once who was really doing performance art for his composition folio, and there was, and she had to organize getting the groundsman to play the chainsaw for one of his pieces. We had a broken vase piece that he was doing that involved sweeping it up, and he was running over time on his folio, so he told him he had to perform because he could have more time if he was improvising. And but he wrote up a brilliant context statement for him. So helping him, he really wanted to push things, and helping him find a way to do that within that system. So creativity, innovation, and appropriateness, how you fit with the field and how you don't. There's been a lot of work done on stages of the creative process, because we like stages. So there's the preparation, what you need to do to be ready to make something, incubating, let it all stew in the back of your head till the insight comes out, and then you have to figure out how to elaborate that, test it, and communicate it. With artistic processes, it's a lot more cyclical, the research is showing, and there's inspiration all the way through. Jonathan Harvey, composer, pointed out that there's even inspiration in copying parts. The one thing I guess I wanted to make a point about with flow was that it's attracted a lot of attention. One of the things I think has not always gotten the attention I'd like it to is that the activity in which you experience flow needs to be on the edge of your skill set. So you're learning something new, you're experiencing something new. Not completely off the edge of your skill set. You've got to feel confident that you've got a chance of being able to do this. But it's exciting because it's a bit untried. And one of the interesting implications of that is that it's going to be different for every student. So we need to create learning cultures that accept that one person's rut may be another person's edge. And of course, the edge keeps moving. There's all sorts of things in school cultures that make that, the flow experience difficult. Assessment endangers the intrinsic motivation aspects, and not worrying about failure. But I think we can play that game a little better. So most of the recent theories since then have been looking at how creativity practice is really socially and culturally and physically embedded. And it's not just in an individual's head. And I think that, it does involve a journey towards mastery, but that happens in your body, that happens in your relationships, it happens in the way you collaborate. That collaboration is actually a skill that one can develop. So expert-like learners then, this is where I want to head, thinking about what it is we're trying to nurture and create, or not create, but what do you want your students to be? I want them to be like this. I want them to be progressive problem solvers that can reflect on what they've done and made and notice new things to try and explore. That they're aware of the knowledge that their body has as well as their mind, that they're part of a community of at least musicians, artists, human beings, and are learning how to contribute to that and help other people's works along as well as their own. They're learning to read the context they're in, the art form context, the social one, the educational, and shape their creations so they've got a place in that. One of the hazards and beauties of notation software is that your introvert kid can go and create great masterpieces in his bedroom that don't have any connection to reality. So, part of their development needs to be, how does this work with the real people, whether it's listeners or performers or whatever. So and again, that'll be an asynchronous thing to nurture. And then they're the people to shape those contexts for the next generation. So aiming for expert-like learners, I'm going to blitz through this. We get to talk more in the other session. Giving them safe places to explore and play. And the safety is generally safety, probably not just from broken glass and stuff, but from fear and shame and peer relationships or feelings of failure, that to establish a culture where, most things, unless they're actually hostile and oppressive and abusive, are that, yeah, that's worth a try. So yes is the default setting, but follow it by, let's think about how. So if you want to write a piece for Ford Falcon engines, work out how to do it. And you put that on them to work out how to do it, but then help make the connections if it's viable and if they stick with the idea. Accepting varying levels of experience and ability, encouraging everyone to learn and improve. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, but it does take a little bit of conscious cultivating, I think, because it's awfully easy to celebrate the stars and not notice the steps where people are trying to make up for their asynchrony and celebrate those things. So opportunities and challenges to try new things, risk-friendly environment, nothing's wrong. Some things just don't work as well in this context. So if it didn't work there, maybe we find another place for it. And then getting a second chance on the things you try to do. Not that it's compulsory, but tasks with scope for revision. So if it's something that they like, but it didn't quite work, or it didn't quite work because they transposed the tenor sax part wrong, and so it sounded crap, but now I know how to make it good, so can I have another go? You know, have another go. And yes, that tenor sax situation did happen in real life once, and in my, you know, not my personal experience. Like, that was the only problem. Poor kid needed another chance to have the piece played. Didn't get it. So definitely opportunities to share their creations, but you know, in the intermediate stages, not just when it's finished, make performing creative works normal. So performers think that's what they're supposed to do before they get to conservatorio, where they're separated from the composers. That's not quite the case as much as it used to be. And then a healthy downplaying of assessment. The perspective that it's not the most important thing, that you can use the assessment game to help you achieve your own musical goals. And that's I think a really big challenge, but important one in our fearful student culture that we have really happening in senior secondary and secondary these days. If it can be a place where, oh yeah, we got to do this, and here's what's good about the criteria for that task, and those will help you along, but you can do this too, or let's find a way to do what you really want to do so we can, you know, make it meet the criteria. It's kind of like modeling and teaching them how to beat the system in its own game for their own advantage. So I think that's something that probably needs a lot of attention these days for students who feel stressed out and like they don't have enough time to do anything. So I'm not going to do anything if it's not assessed. You just have to build a world where, no, we're playing, sorry. We're going to do that too. So empowering tools for capturing and communicating their ideas. Everyone should learn to record. Everyone should learn to notate something a little bit. They should all be able to play chords and beatbox so they can communicate their ideas. Ways to listen to a piece and you know, hear what's in it and be able to communicate that. And then tools and strategies for deliberate practice when they get to that. And that's a kind of an intermediate stage after playing and discovery. But we shouldn't let them get stuck in playing and discovery if it's something they love. You know, because when you don't make progress with it, then it's not so interesting. And you go on to something else where you're on the edge of your skill set, and that's where the flow happens. And so I'm going to go do that instead. I'm going to play soccer. Or I'm going to switch instruments. So if we can keep them, yeah, here's a way, you know, nudge forward a little bit, and isn't that cool? And the more they can understand about their own learning, and then feel like they're in a positive peer community, I think the easier that is too, and the healthier it is. So be a believer in them, be an advocate. You do the things that an adult can do that they can't do. You make connections with people outside. You get the principal to allow certain things to happen. You know, you organize the groundsman to play the chainsaw, whatever it is, and you bring people in that real world that they're, you know, on the edge of. They're listening to expertly produced music all the time. The tools we give them can help along with that, but also meeting the people that are in that game so they realize how huge it is. But it's work and it's all achievable. And, you know, increase your market share. How do you survive? Be obsessed, but get time off. Be interested in them. Be interested in what they're interested in just because you're interested in them. You don't have to be an expert in it. They can teach you. Yeah. I think that establishing positive culture things really important and probably a lot easier to do than sometimes we think, that this space can just be a place where we behave differently. And they get that. You know, we might behave some other way in the lunchroom, but we behave differently here. And then make connections to them beyond school. Invite other people to fill the gaps you have so you don't have to do it all. Keep building a community. That was a blitz. We out of time yet, Wendy?
We are. We're 1 minute over our allocated time. We're going.
I thought I was
now.
pushing that. So bring questions in the next session.
Yeah, absolutely. Could be a lot of questions, but it was really interesting to hear ideas about, the theory behind it, but also what we can do practically in the classroom to encourage our students. So thank you very much, Karlin. And hopefully you'll get some people on this afternoon in your next session.
So sorry that was such a talk blitz, but I thought if I did it there, then I could be more human in the next one. So
and the files in the chat there, I see.
Yeah, the reference ones there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, people. Have a good lunch.
All righty. Bye.
Okay.